Hello and welcome to Learning with Maya Savidra. Today we will be building a gingerbread house that I got from Target. I'd be going into more detail about the interview I did with the 7th Generation Cultural Center about Native American representation in the media. As you can see, I've switched to landscape mode. You're welcome. Also, shout out to Target. I got a black Santa the other day, and I think it's really cute. Real representation. Okay. So you're gonna want a tray. This is an old tray that my parents don't really care about anymore. And you're gonna want to get a gingerbread kit, like this one here. But one of the things that stuck out to me a lot when I spoke to people of the 7th generation was that they were kind of wary about telling me a lot of their opinions about CMU and what CMU does and all that kind of, and about our use of the name Chippewa. As mentioned in the podcast, they really care about having a relationship with CMU, and they don't want to make anybody mad, and they don't want to be like kicked out of events, and they don't want to not be able to share things that they find important. But that made me pretty sad. Like, that's pretty terrible that you can't even speak your mind because you're so worried that, you know, CMU is going to cut you off. Like, if CMU really cared, do they? That's the question of the day. If CMU really cared about the local Saginaw Chippewa tribe, they would really try to do as much as they could to get them to be comfortable and be like, hey, I don't like what you're doing. This is what I want. And they would have an open dialogue, but CMU hasn't really done that, in my opinion. One of the things that I'm really passionate about lately is I really want CMU to kind of be uncomfortable and to have to answer for all of these things that are going on. Anywho, I need a pair of scissors. I'm gonna open up this little package. I also like this little gingerbread house because it's an A-frame house. If you've seen the movie Midsummer, there's this big yellow A-frame house where they burned people. That was a fun time. Now, this isn't so much a tutorial as much as I'm just following the directions. So really, anybody in the world can do this craft if you have $9 to spend at Target and a local Target near you. So it says I have to massage this frosting pouch because it's too hard. I know this is kind of suspicious, it might seem kind of silly, but I'm not going to name any of the people that I talked to just because they really were worried about it, and I really doubt that anybody from CMU is even going to watch this. Can you imagine if President Davies actually watched this, though, and then like tried to take away my Max scholarship or something? That would be kind of crazy. But I just won't name them because they don't want me to, and I respect that. But one of the things that I learned about was that a lot of the people from the tribe weren't really asked, they didn't really have a say in whether or not the Saginaw Chippewa name could be used. The Michigan Act that was passed that said that you can't use any names or iconography or any kind of stuff like that. You can't use it for your school anymore. The reason CMU kind of got around that was because CMU really wanted really bad to keep the name for merchandising purposes. And one of the people that I spoke to said, you know, our culture is not for sale. But again, they didn't want to say that on the podcast because they don't want to get in trouble. CMU spoke to, like, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe kind of has a board, and they also kind of have like a public relations type thing. And so back in the 80s when they were changing the name because they had to, well, when they were getting flack for the mascot because they still had the mascot, alumni really liked the name, and of course alumni like really want to buy products with the name Chippewa on it and like fire up chips on it and that kind of stuff. And so they spoke to the board, and here's an interesting fact that I learned about the board of the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. Most of the board does not participate in any native cultural events, and they don't really go onto the reservation. They kind of just stay in their high tower and don't talk to the people. They're kind of, in my opinion, they just do it for the money, which is sad because that's your whole culture and you should care about that. But in my opinion, they care more about the money. And so that's why they kind of agreed to let CMU use it. Also, when the decision was being made about what to do with the mascot and the name and all that other stuff, they only had a few Native people on the board to decide, and the rest of them were white people. So guess what that means? Whenever they voted for something, obviously it was mostly white opinions versus Native opinions. So they were outvoted because there were so many more white people than there were Native people, which seems pretty suspicious to me, if you ask me. So then you get this piece, and you put it on your tray, like so. And then you get your frosting, and you cut the tip off. Ooh, okay. Then we're gonna pipe frosting around this little perimeter thingy. I wish I had 2 cameras, because if you had 2 cameras, you can have one camera like looking at what I'm doing and the other camera on my face. But I don't have 2 cameras. Basically what this all adds up to is that the Saginaw, Chippewa, actual like Native people like living in the reservations and locally and all that kind of stuff, they didn't have a say in whether or not their name could be used because the board didn't ask them. They just did it because they knew CMU was going to give them some money and stuff. When I spoke to some of the people at the 7th generation, they were not quite pleased that they were not asked. Fair, because that's not nice. That's their culture too. And they weren't asked. They just did it. So then you put one of these bad boys towards the back. And you press it down like so. And then you get one of these bad boys. One of the roofing parts. Ah! And you pipe the sides. Woo! I was speaking to Daniel about this thing at U of M. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with our school, so nobody will probably get mad at me. So at U of M, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, our Saginaw Chippewa tribe found out that U of M had the remains of like some of their tribal leaders, I believe, just because they were studying them or they had them in a museum or something. And so the tribe asked for their remains back. They were like, hey, that's our people. Can you give us our people back, please? Which is fair. And also because, like, as I've kind of picked up, Native Americans, they have like very unique and different like kind of burial traditions and like traditions for past people than Americans do, like an American kind of white culture. And so they never got the chance to do that. So obviously they wanted their remains back so they could have the chance to do that. Did I do this wrong? Okay. So you see this pretty little pebble thing? This is supposed to go in the front. So don't do what I did and glue it on the right way. Oh, I see now. Do you see? They asked for their remains back, and U of M didn't want to give them their remains back for whatever reason. And so I think, if I remember correctly, basically what happened was the Saginaw Chippewa tribe and U of M kind of had like a little legal battle because they needed their remains back, and U of M wouldn't give them to them, which is not nice. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. That just seems kind of messed up to me. And so the Saginaw Chippewa tribe won, and they got to have their remains back. But after that whole thing went down, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe was no longer allowed to host their event that they had been doing at U of M because U of M was now mad about it. The Saginaw Chippewa tribe, when that happened, they were kind of like, okay, we get it. We can't really speak out against you guys because then we'll lose our ties, which they feel are very important to teaching people about their culture. Because I don't want them to get in trouble either. But also, CMU should take the responsibility. Because here's the thing. The other thing that just makes me mad is CMU loves to be like, we're inclusive. And they have this whole thing about like, their new thing is like, we do community. And so one of the we do community things is we do like inclusion, blah, blah, blah. And we have all these wonderful programs and we have impact. CMU says all that, but what are they really doing? Not just with the local Saginaw Chippewa tribe, well, especially with them because we're on their land and we continue to use their nickname that we're not supposed to. But CMU says all that, but what are they really doing to even help everybody? So I don't like how CMU likes to pretend that we're all inclusive and all that other stuff, but what are we doing for the tribe? We're silencing them. Okay, so now when it's all done, you get to put your frosting on the top. When I was in high school, my band director used to, when I was getting around Christmas time, he used to just sing Silver Bells, he would just go, Silver Bells, in class randomly, like under his breath kind of. It was pretty funny and I do miss that. Shout out to you, Mr. Jones, if you're watching this. I'm not trying to talk smack about CMU, but I just feel like if you go to school somewhere, you should love your school so much that you want it to be the best it should be. And I do want CMU to be the best it should be, and it's not right now. And they need to stop being like that. Also, my CGL class, I remember one of the students that was in my class, but she was trying to interview President Davies. She asked him about CMU's use of the name Chippewa. And President Davies kind of said something, which, I mean, shout out to President Davies. I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I know he's probably trying his hardest. I don't think he's a bad person by any means at all, and I've never met him, and he probably won't want to meet me now. But he kind of needs to be more woke, more just like aware of what's happening. And if you're the president of a university, you need to be very culturally aware and very culturally educated, I feel like. And he said, well, we're not going to change the name because our name does a lot for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. They get a lot of promotion or something like that. So that's a really lame excuse and very not okay if you ask me. Well, it's okay that we stole their name for merchandising purposes because we wanted our alumni to like us, because we give them a lot of promotion. And as I've said before, we don't give them a lot of promotion because in the podcast episode, I kind of talk about how I've never heard of 7th Generation or any of the facilities. None of my professors or anybody has ever told me about the kind of stuff that goes on over there. I never learned anything about their traditions. I never learned anything about their land. And so that's a lie. Like, that's a blatant lie. CMU doesn't promote the Saginaw Chippewa tribe nearly enough. I don't know anything about them, and I didn't know anything about them until I went to the 7th Generation and got a tour. We have, somebody comes to bless the football game every year, and like they come, a representative comes to like graduation, but that's kind of all that ever happens as far as our contact with the tribe. We don't invite them to do anything else, which is pretty grimy. Now I've finished and I'm beginning to put little decorations on it. These are little light candies. I wonder if they taste good. So basically, as I said in my podcast, I now want to become a vigilante. And if you'd like to help me out, that would be pretty cool. What I mean by that is my new main mission in my time at CMU is to make CMU so uncomfortable and for all the students to kind of come together and get mad enough that CMU has to change the name Chippewa. Also, the name Chippewa, the reason we became the Chippewas in the first place was because of what? Merchandising. You guessed it, everything is about money. So we used to be like the Dragons, which I feel is significantly cooler than the Chippewas, but we changed it because like in the 30s and 40s, everyone was racist, as I'm sure you all know. And they were like, oh, the native people were like savages and they're like tough and scary. So that would be a really cool mascot. Racists. And so for us to kind of say it's tradition is also just kind of a lie. The reason we do it is because of alumni money. So here's the thing. Let me get my tea. I wanted to show everybody this mug because in my town, Port Huron, Michigan, racism is alive. Woodrow Wilson Elementary School, and their mascot is a little chief. My dad used to teach there, so that's why we have this mug still. And then my school's mascot, Port Huron High School, our name is the Big Reds. And guess what our mascot is? A chief who's red. So that's also racist. Racist name and racist logo. But anyway, so let's talk about the CMU alumni now. So one of the main reasons that I also talked about with my professor is CMU is kind of less fortunate money-wise than other schools like U of M and all that other kind of stuff. And so I understand why we need to keep our relationship up with our alumni, because especially older alumni, who are racist, by the way, old people are just racist in general, they like the connection they have to the name Chippewa. I guess I can kind of understand that because they went to school there, but also we could slowly work out the name Chippewa and slowly start to replace it with another name. And that way, the alumni will be less pissed off at us and still give us money and all that other stuff that we need. CMU did change their mascot, which was racist. And now we have the flying C, which is just nothing. So I guess that's one step towards progress. But there's so much more progress to be made. Not even just with changing the name, but just with being more inclusive in general. I want CMU to really care about their students more. You know, they can claim to be, they can claim to be as inclusive as they want, but where are the results? I don't know if this is actually based in reality, but I have been thinking about this quite a bit. I live in the Towers. The Towers is the most diverse living place on campus. So number one, not only do a lot of people who live in other parts of campus, not only are they kind of racist, because I remember my roommate, one time she was talking about, somebody was giving like her a ride back from somewhere, and they were like, oh, where do you live? And she was like, the Towers. And this is what people say a lot, like students say a lot. They're like, oh, you live in the Towers? It's really crazy in there. It's like a party town. It's like people have called it a zoo, literally a zoo, which is, I mean, a dog whistle, if you ask me. I know other places on campus, like, where is it? Where like nobody lives. I think it's like South Campus. Who lives in South Campus? Nobody lives there, but they have police officers there to watch their residents to make sure they're safe. And to me, that doesn't make sense because number one, less people live there. Number two, it's mostly white people that live over there. And number three, if the Towers is the most populous place on campus, because it's also the most populous living quarters on campus, how come we don't have security over there? Maybe I'm just a crazy, radical person on this issue, at least. But I feel like that's kind of weird. Ooh, ah. Oh, this is sad. I tried. This is really melty icing compared to the white. I will say, my interview with Professor Halter, we talk a little bit more smack about CMU. And it's just because he taught us a lot in class about what CMU can do and about the importance of really, being more inclusive and all that kind of stuff. And so we talk a little bit more about this in the episode, but I feel like if we are on native land that was stolen from the Saginaw Chippewa people to build a university for mostly white students, then how come we don't require students to take a course about Native history? Because I feel like that's something you should do. So I'm a Mac Scholar. So as a Mac Scholar, I have to take certain courses to fulfill my scholarship requirements to get my scholarship. And I understand that, it is hard to make students take a class because students have so many other responsibilities to do, like to fulfill their course requirements. But I feel like, now this might be a crazy thing for me to say, I'm just gonna put it right out there, but I had to take a math class. My degree has absolutely, fruitly nothing to do with math at all. And I already did math in high school. This is my other thing, getting a little bit sidetracked. But why do you need to learn more than algebra and geometry? I feel like algebra and geometry, those are like the highest math courses you absolutely need as a functioning human being. But if you're not going into math or science or anything like that, like if you don't need it for your career, why are they making us take it in college? I feel like they could make a little bit more room without making us take those things that we don't need. And they could instead replace it with a requirement to learn about Native studies. We could have like a Native studies class. And I feel like that's really important, because if CMU refuses to change their name, the very least they can do to prove that they really care about Native people and Native issues is to make students take a course in Native studies. I also need to give money to the Native people. Reparations, baby. Because when I was talking to Daniel, something he told me was that this is a Mount Pleasant thing and not so much a CMU thing, but so a lot of their landmarks that they had that belonged to them as like Native people, obviously the land was taken from them like way back when white people were running rampant. And so, you know, recently in recent decades, they've wanted to get it back because it's their land and it has sacred like value to them and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? They had to buy their land back that belonged to them, that was stolen from them in the first place. That's crazy. It's like if somebody stole something you have, like a pair of shoes or whatever, and then you were like, hey, give me my shoes back. And they were like, okay, $200 though to get your shoes back that belonged to you in the first place. That's crazy. Like, yeah, so we really want to get this back, but we have to buy it back. We don't have the funds for it right now. And I was like, wow, that's terrible. So CMU, another thing they should do before, but CMU spent money, enormous amounts of money on a stupid football stadium. Why? We don't really need that. And if CMU put their students first and really prioritize students, that wouldn't have even crossed their mind, because there's other things like you need to update buildings, I guess. But another thing is, if they can spend money on stupid stuff like that, the big stupid arch that we don't need, and the big stupid football stadium, how come they can't spend money on the local tribe that they took the land from? More? Or we should at least have like a little committee of students who put on like a little fundraiser for them every year. Something like that I would be okay with that. That would make me feel comfortable again. Okay, so here are my trees. It is fruit flavored because the purple is grape and the red is cherry, I believe. The students of CMU, this is just in general, we pay the school. Like our tuition and all that other stuff, we're their employers, if you really think about it. And so if we all kind of get mad enough and angry enough and threaten them enough, we can scare them into being not racist anymore. Another thing that I learned when I was at the 7th generation was that, you know, I can't point fingers at anybody, because there's a lot of things to fund within the community. There's have a local like clinic, like a health clinic, a local dentist, like run by the tribe within the facility, like just that's available and affordable to the residents and all that kind of stuff. And there's like an elementary school. There's a lot of things to fund. So I understand that there's like a lack of money, and I can't really blame anybody for that. I wish I could, because I like to blame people. It seemed a little suspicious and off to me. So the language loss within the Saginaw Chippewa tribe is enormous. Like, as you can probably hear in the podcast, as I talked to Daniel about, you know, the 97%, I believe he said, of the people within the reservation do not know the language, and Daniel himself didn't know the language. He had to go to school to learn it. And so something I learned while at 7th generation from some of the people there was that there's this little house where like they were trying to teach the kids about the language so that they can learn the language as they're young and can like continue to learn it. But it only runs from like young 4s to kindergarten, and that's it. And then after that, they don't teach them anymore because they don't have enough money to fund that. And so obviously, if you're only learning when you're little and you don't learn anymore and you don't have anybody to keep up with because your parents don't speak the language, guess what? You're going to lose the language. It's going to be gone forever. And something that seems suspicious to me was that it seems like Soaring Eagle Casino and their facilities, they don't necessarily give enough to the local community to actually help them keep up with traditions and all that kind of stuff. Because as I said, those people aren't really within the community anymore, which also seems fishy. So as you can see, I've added little people. I have a little penguin and a little elf. He keeps falling. So thank you for joining me today on this episode of Learning with me, Maya Savitra. If you have any suggestions for future videos or topics to explore on the podcast, please let me know. Follow Underlying Frequencies on Instagram. And make CMU pay. You won't get in trouble, I promise. If you're worried about that, don't be. Because we pay their bills, as I said. Bob Davies, as I've said, is a lizard person. And he hides his lizard antenna in his hat, which is why he wears it all the time. Okay, so here's the final product. Ooh, look at that. Details. Have a nice holiday, whatever you celebrate. Make gingerbread houses or whatever you make. And when we come back to school, join me in my quest to make CMU uncomfortable and to be nicer to our native friends, who we should all care about because we all took the land from them. Ka-chow. Bye.